we're ready to reconvene.
Former President Izumi.
Is your daughter?
I know, look at former President Izumi. Thank you very much for taking your seats. Thank you, and Jerry, for a very nice lunch. Thank you. We're going to change our agenda a little bit because we have our guest here, Rocky Chavez, the Undersecretary of Veterans Affairs for the state of California, and he's going to be introduced by Bobby McDonald, who may have just left the room. Oh, there he is. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you.
Okay, fellow board members, I'm very pleased to introduce Undersecretary Rocky Chavez, who had the opportunity of, well, let's put it this way, I had the opportunity of meeting a couple times down in Orange County, thanks to the program that I started with Senator Lou Correa, who's Vice Chair of the Veterans Committee. Got a chance to meet Rocky when he came on board, and we got a chance to march in the Tet Festival Parade, first part of February. And I had his ear for about an hour, and I also had a sword and a gun, so you had to listen. And I asked him we talked about veterans, and we talked about what we were going to do from the community college standpoint, and how I like to connect dots, and what we need to do to help, and looking at other agencies and other areas to help us out in our veterans. And so he says, well, gosh, I'd love to come speak to the board. And I said, I could probably make that happen. But the good news is you have a bio on him. I won't go too deep into it, but there's one piece in there that's not in the bio that I need to share with you, is that he went to El Camino College. Rocky Chavez.
Oh,
Thank you.
excuse me 1 second before you start speaking. Vice Chancellor Michalowski, can you introduce the group that just came in the room as our audience also? Thank you.
I would love to. I can't personally introduce everyone by name, but coincidentally today we had a meeting of our Veterans Coordinators, Regional Representatives Advisory Group. So they were meeting just down the hall, and President Malumed and Member McDonald got to meet them this morning. And so we thought we'd invite them in since the Assistant Secretary was here. And in the back row is Betsy Sheldon, who is on my staff as the coordinator for mental health services, working with this group. And next to her is Ellie Zelmer, who is the lead person working with our veterans.
Thank you. I just wanted you to know who was behind you also.
Well, thank you. Maybe can I use that mic?
You're Colonel.
You can't talk to everybody.
I don't like to talk to people behind me. How's this thing going?
Yeah, it's on.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We're good. What I'd like to start off first saying is thank you. And let me tell you why I'm saying thank you. My father served in the Marine Corps in World War II, and he had a 5th grade education. He was 17 of 18 children. 16 of those children were born in Mexico. He worked through the fields, but when World War II came on, he joined the Marine Corps. And at the end of the World War II, as I recall, we lived in a little barrio in Redondo Beach, and our little houses we were on these little white houses on these bricks. I remember as a kid, because you could always crawl underneath the house and run around. It's kind of cool. But he was working at the U.S. Steel Mill, and in the evenings when he'd come back, my mother would wrap tortillas and beans in a little tortilla, and he'd take off with his burrito, and he would go off to El Camino Junior College. And through El Camino Junior College, he was able to be educated in the aerospace industry. At the time in the 50s and 60s, it was taken off, and as it was, let's see, probably about 1957, we moved out of the barrio in Redondo Beach to a suburb called Torrance. And it was because of the community, the junior college, and the GI Bill and the veterans that allowed him to, I would say, achieve the American dream, because as I joke around, talk to my son, he's a graduate, both my daughter and son are graduated Davis. My other son went to the Coast Guard Academy. But my oldest son graduated from UPenn Medicine as a doctor. He's a doctor today. And I told him that's the American dream. When a lot of people talk about immigration and what's going on and veterans, and it all gets down to, I think, the most important thing is education. It's about education. And as I said earlier, I went to El Camino Junior College also. My claim to fame, at one time, I was actually the #1 rated wrestler in the state of California when I was at El Camino Junior College. But I'll tell you, that's another story. So anyway, so I have a very, if you can't feel it, a passionate love for what you all represent. I mean, you give so much opportunity to so many people like my father and myself. Okay, right now I'm the Undersecretary, California Department of Veteran Affairs. I brought a little sheet here to show you. It gave you all a little sheet that talks to you about where the veterans are going. As you can see, the veterans, to a large degree, are at the community colleges. I'm very fortunate. I work for a great secretary named Roger Brodigan. And Roger was the undersecretary until I came in. The other secretary had moved on. And prior, the focus of the department of CDVA was on homes. You may recall 6, 7, 8 years ago, there were some incidents at some of our homes for veterans where the care wasn't what it shouldn't have been. That was corrected. I can tell you today, the homes that we run today are the best in the nation. We're very proud of that. We'd also like to say that our CalVet loan program is one of the programs that gives people the opportunity to have the American Dream houses. But we know that probably about 97% of the veterans we're not reaching through either one of those programs. There's about 30,000 veterans returning to the state of California every year. And these veterans who are coming back are veterans who want to fulfill, as I call it, the American dream. Many of them women, large percentage of women now in the military. Women and men have gone overseas. They're coming back. A good portion of them are able to step right into the game plan and go back and work on the American dream through education and jobs. Sorry to say, some of them are not able to right now, and they need our help. There's two items I'm going to bring into you, terms that you may not be aware of. One is traumatic brain injury, TBI. Why that's new to us today is because of the type of warfare we're in. You have young service women and men in vehicles that the way the tactics are going, they'll be in a hardened vehicle that'll hit a bomb, that'll pick the vehicle up and throw it. The individual will be able to live inside, but they suffer a traumatic brain injury, a concussion to themselves, which needs medical attention and care. Too often, when military are coming back and they go through a program before they go out of the military, there's always a physical, and they ask them, "Are everything okay?" And when you're 22 years old and you want to get out of the military, you know, if you say, "Well, no, I got a ringing in my ear, I have headaches," then you get to stick around for a couple more months to go through the medical thing. And young people, when you're 21, 22, and you know you're bulletproof because you just went through wars, they just leave. And those are popping up later on when they're in their educational environments, when they can't study or they can't read or there's some other problem that they're having. The other item that's coming through is an illness that's been around. I'm a kind of an historian buff. I just finished reading a book about Caesar's Legion, the 10th Legion. And if you read that book, there's a portion in there talking about that when Caesar brought in legionnaires, they came in for 20 years. And they did the same thing that we're doing. 20 years is kind of interesting. They did 20 years. Even today, we do 20 years in the military for the retirement. Because at about that time, between 17 to 37, when you have warriors that can fight. Well, the Romans knew this also, that when they had problems, legionnaires that were 39 or 42 were supposed to be on farms taken care of were having problems. And they'd often come back and volunteer again to fight within the legion. What they were suffering with Caesar's legions is the same thing we suffered in World War II, the Civil War, and we're suffering today, just that we're smarter now, and we call it post-traumatic stress syndrome. And what it means is that when you go through such horrific events, that you do not forget those. And it's not just about warriors. You can talk to, I sat for 6 years on a board called the Women's Resource Center Board in Oceanside, dealt with domestic abuse and sexual trauma, and it's the same thing. People, when they go through that sort of thing, it's not something that you can just dismiss, and if you've never gone through it, you don't understand what people are going through. And we're seeing that in the educational area where we're finding out people just need to have some sort of counseling and help. Some of your community colleges, I was on the internet looking at them today, are doing a wonderful, wonderful outreach to these veterans to deal with both these issues. They have veteran service organizations. They have good staff members out there working with them. And what they're doing is they're helping them either connect with the medical. I was at Monterey Peninsula College 2 weeks ago, and they have a VA there, and they're actually getting those soldiers, airmen, sailors, Marines over there to care they need. And they're working with the counseling department so they can complete their education and go on and do the American dream. If we don't do that, then you're going to remember in the 1980s or 1990s, you would not be uncommon to see people on the streets who were homeless. And those are the individuals from the Vietnam War. A lot of people say, well, I was down at Veterans Village in San Diego a month ago, and they had some homeless individuals from the Desert Storm era, and people say, well, they're Vietnam veterans. No. If you study, I was involved as a council member in Oceanside to set up Regional Homeless Task Force in North County. One of the proudest things I think I had the opportunity to do was to help homeless people. You don't live real long on the streets. You know, you may see somebody and they think, God, that person looks 60 or 70 years old. When you actually talk to them, they're like in their 40s. And when you sit out in the streets and you're not clean and you're catching diseases and you're doing everything to stay alive, from prostitution to selling drugs to using drugs to self-medicating, somebody, because I came in at the end of the Vietnam War and I'm 58 going to 59, if I was on the streets for 30 years, I probably wouldn't be here today. So we're seeing a different group of people. And so as I said earlier, I have a very good secretary. I said, you know what? We do good homes. We got good loan programs. But let's do a little prevention. Let's go out there and meet the young people who are coming back and partner with the educational institutions, partner with the nonprofits, partner with any way we can to reach these young veterans, these 30,000 a year that are coming back to California, and help them. And you're doing a great job in that in some of your community colleges. And some of them are just starting, like when that was at Monterey Peninsula College. When they came to us and said, how can we help them? And the time I started setting it up in Monterey, I think she told me there's 117 veterans on their rolls. When we actually did the conference there 2 weeks ago, there were like 230. You are getting the bulk. Your institutions, education institutions, are getting the bulk of our veterans, and they need help. And so there's a lot of good templates out there. Be happy to talk to you about it. Be happy to partner with you on that. But just as I talked about why I'm passionate about junior college or community colleges because of my family and personal experiences, I'm also passionate about the young people coming back today that need our help. And so that's why I wanted, when Bobby said, hey, Rocky, he told me what he did. I said, oh, wow. Can I go talk to your people? Because we're off in a new direction out of CDVA, working with partners. Because we know in California there isn't a lot of money. But we do know if we partner together on something that's just and right, like helping the women and men who have fought for the American dream, to allow them to enjoy the American dream when they come back. So that's my message, and I'm open up for questions.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any members who would like to make a comment or a question? The Chancellor.
Yeah. Kind of give us briefly what services you think the community colleges ought to, would, if we possibly could, you think we ought to offer to the veterans? What would be how would you sum up some of the services that we could offer?
I had a meeting an hour or 2 hours ago with a gentleman named Bucky Peterson, Colonel Bucky Peterson. She knows him. And I said, you know, they're going to ask me a question over there. What services? And the solution is really just a place in your institution to allow the veterans to meet, to share their own support structures. That there needs to be a regionalization. We're finding out as we look around that certain areas, San Diego's one, Orange County's going there, Monterey Peninsula College, they're not there yet. Where they actually work together with the veteran service organizations. Those are the VFWs, American Legions, the GI Forums. Work together with the county veteran service officers. Those are the people out of the counties that get them their benefits. We bring billions of dollars in the state of California from there. But we can't reach the veterans because they don't, back when they were taking their transition assistance program, leaving the military, they're more excited about getting out of the military. They're thinking of their pensions and benefits. We're trying to meet them. And what they're doing is they're coming to your education institutions, and we need to have a place where we can first get them their benefits, and second, a place when they're having problems, because they're going to know each other. They're going to know that Rocky's missing class because maybe he's self-medicating. Or they're going to know that Rocky he's studying his little butt off at night, but he can't read, and he won't quit. If there's a place like in San Diego State, when I have a little veteran service officer, it's a little place with a couch and a TV, and it's all staffed and run by the veterans themselves, where they can share each other and connect into the help. Because the help's going to come from the federal VA for the medical, the help's going to be from the state and fed for education, the help's going to come from all those veteran organizations, and there are literally tens of thousands of veterans out there who want to help them. I was in a meeting in Santa Maria last week, and these are gentlemen out of Desert Storm in Vietnam, and I said, what do you want us to do in Santa Maria? Because we're doing a thing called All Hands. We're doing 10 outreaches across the state this year, and we're going to be at a community college, all 10 of them. And the reason we're going to community colleges, right now, I just talked about Monterey Peninsula. We're going to Hancock at Santa Maria. I can't remember the one. I got another one in Santa Ana. We're going to go to the community college because we know that's where the veterans are. And if we can reach them and talk to them. But they need a place to meet, and they need to have somebody on the staff to say they're their representative to the establishment. But that's about it. We don't need the money. We just need a place where they can be, sir. And there's a resource out there that can help them.
Member McDougall?
Yeah, what veteran services are provided or perhaps should be provided by the community colleges that assist the veteran to identify the strengths of the training that they've received, for example, through the various military operating specialties that they have, and how that training might be converted into credits? Is there something the Veterans Administration does now, or is there some way the Veterans Administration can collaborate with the colleges to take advantage of, if you will, boosting those young men and women along by giving them credit for a lot of wonderful training that they've already received?
That's in the counseling area. I know in the Marine Corps, before we allow our Marines to get out, at least we counsel them on it, that we actually ask them to take evaluations and put in for their college credit. And a lot of the community colleges work with us on that. So when the Marines are leaving, let's say they're a radio technician, for example, we'll go, or surveyor man. Survey people use a lot of math, a lot of equations, a lot of computers, do a lot of fancy stuff. So they actually get credit for that before they leave the services. It would also be, I guess, in your counseling area. So when a young Marine shows up and he has 0 credit, a light bulb had to go off saying, well, what was your MOS? There's actually a book that shows different, MOS is military occupant specialty. You could actually look in there and say, if you have these sort of skills in the military, it equates to certain credits in college. And so they already have that there. So that's had to be in a counseling area. But if a young military person comes to your community college, and they have 0 credits, you know somebody dropped the ball in DOD because they shouldn't be getting out with 0 credits. They should have some. I always tease people about the military. In the 28 years I served in the Marine Corps, I spent probably about 8 years in college. I mean, I got so tired of going to school, it was crazy. But anyway, it was fun. I love it, but it was a lot of school.
Well, that was one of my questions is, as people are getting ready to leave the military, what kind of counseling are they getting about, I'll just talk about community colleges, you know, what their opportunities are in the state of California. Do they get any of that counseling in their last few weeks?
There's a thing called Transition Assistance Program called TAP. They're supposed to be getting that. There's also a requirement.
Wait, I noticed you used the word supposed to be getting that.
That's
Do they
right,
get it?
because it's all over the state, and I'm finding out I'm just new, so I don't want to be too hard.
I'm just
on this.
asking, yeah.
But a gentleman told me today, he said, it's broken. And so, and I see some heads going up and down, so maybe they agree with me. There's another head or so. So I have not been in it. I know this. When I left in 2001, I went in the TAP and saw it, and I said, I got other things to do in my life, and didn't do it. But I was in a little different situation. So that's TAP. There's also a requirement when they're active duty. Every 6 months, every service person, at least in the Marine Corps, is required to see a commanding officer and sit down and say, you thinking about re-ing up? If you're not going to re-up, are you going to get out? What are you looking for college? What are your opportunities? You know, here's your benefits. And the active duty are supposed to do that. And I can tell you, my experience in the Marine Corps showed very rarely does that happen. Because I used to do it all the time. Kids would look at me like a, pig looking at a watch, thinking, why are you talking to me like this? You know, because I think it's important you go to school, and I think you have a lot of opportunities here. But so that doesn't happen either. I think it's a lot about life. I mean, how many times did somebody tell you not to do something that went right over your head? Or somebody tell you need to watch out for that, and you go, yeah. And then when you actually get into it on that floating mortgage issue or whatever you got into, and you say, God, I wish I'd have paid attention to that fine print. So it's that's, I think, we're dealing with people.
And thank you for bringing the graph. We had a question yesterday. Do you have a sense of what % of the students are going into the private colleges in our state?
I have a graph on that showing where all the students are in the state of California for community colleges, state colleges, universities, and private colleges. And then I just looked at it an hour ago. It was, I think, Phoenix had the largest, University of Phoenix had the largest number of veterans going in. And you can take that for what that's worth.
Do you have a sense, is it much smaller, obviously, than any of the other groups on this graph?
The largest group, and I was told that this number is actually underscored, especially in the community colleges, because some of the veterans are holding their cash benefits for the UC system. So really that number, the guy was telling me today, is 5,000 to 10,000 more in the community colleges. Wow. So you have a bigger group out there than that current graph shows.
Member Lockyer?
What programs are in place to educate the family members about some of these issues, and more importantly, to educate them about potential PTSD and their ability to then speak with the active member before they go through the transition? So it's delivering it to them from their perspective, from somebody that they know and trust.
That's a very good question, and that's probably the weakest area we have, because I have the opportunity to travel around the state, and we have outside programs for military dealing with PTSD. And when the problem with outside is too many times the support structure, the mother, the father, the wife, the children don't get involved in that. We have a program up in Yountville, up in Napa, called Pathway Homes. It's actually an in-house program where they go there from 2 to 6 months. And a large component of the program is actually to bring in the mother, father, or spouse on campus to be there over a period of time to deal with it. Because I know in Oceanside, I was a council member in Oceanside next to Camp Pendleton, one of the largest bases around. And as I said earlier, I sat on the Women's Resource Center board that dealt with domestic violence. The sad thing about PTSD is when you see it impact upon a family, it's going to be in domestic violence, it's going to be in child abuse, it's going to be in alcohol and drugs. And so it's extremely important to get the support structures out there to help the service woman or man through that, and to understand the parents and the spouses how to deal with it, and not to allow it to go on to deal with it. And I'm pretty adamant. I don't condone any way to ever harm domestic violence is one of the probably tragedies in our country. But you're exactly right. There needs to be more outreach to that, not enough.
So I was on the board for the Family Violence Project, not the Family Justice Center that I now do. And there was a training that we did through a huge network of people on Camp Pendleton, exactly on the issue that we're just talking about.
Right.
So that you found that beneficial, and I mean that's just a whole entity that I think needs to be tied in that much more, and that needs to be duplicated.
I agree, no doubt about it. Because if you can't, even if you deal with the PTSD as an individual and you set them out there, if you don't have a support structure around them, they're going to fall through the cracks. And that support structure often is a mother, or father, or a spouse.
Thank you. Member McDonald?
Yeah, we're kind of fortunate, Undersecretary, to have the regional group here with us. You know, there are some individuals here that might be able to give you an overview of some of the things that we are doing on our campuses right now from the community colleges, and that might partially answer some of the questions that the chancellor asked. But maybe someone from the group can tell us a little bit about what they're.
You going to tell us?
Way to go, Catherine. Yeah.
I'm also a Marine, so.
You can do that.
Yes.
You're shy.
That's right, I'm shy. We have some great, phenomenal things going on, and that's what we were all talking about and sharing. I am a veterans counselor at Sierra College, and our population has probably almost doubled in the last couple of years to where I meet with 500 veterans. The majority are Marines and Army, and I'd say about probably close to 80% have served in combat. And so because of that, we've been working diligently to try to create that support structure for the veterans, especially when I used to hear from veterans that they were more afraid of going to college, stepping foot in a college, than they were in combat. And I knew that was something that we can make a difference of. Consequently, I teach a Boots to Books college success class, and I team it up with an English A class, because that's most of the veterans do test into basic skill type of classes. And so every semester our veterans, I have usually about 30 of them that take my class on Tuesday nights, and then they take the English class on Thursday nights, so that we can help build a bridge, help with that support system, and not to mention help them so they're not feeling so isolated. In addition to that, we have a Veteran Student Alliance group that just worked at the Rockland Rotary Crab Feed and to raise some money to be able to reach out for other veterans. I think 40 of them are going paintballing next week, and so I'm having that to go along so I can be one of their targets so they can run around with. In addition to that, we've done a writer's workshop in Santa Cruz. We've been working where the veterans they're wanting to share their stories in a safe environment, and so we've done that. But most recently, with the help of the VFWs and their donations, is that the dean of the library has lent us a room almost about this size that we created as a Veterans Resource Center. We have the Veterans County Officer, Rick Beckman, that comes out every Thursday that will assist the veterans with their health benefits, with disability claims. We work with the Forgotten Soldiers program, which has actually been a phenomenal group also, that they offer free massages, free acupressure, different things to de-stress, because it's very, very difficult for the veterans to want to go into the mental health. It's that barrier, that mental health barrier. But what I did find out in the last week, within a week's time, I had 5 of my combat vets go in and get these massages. And then after they get the massages, the Forgotten Soldier also teams up with Vietnam veterans. And so this has been a phenomenal piece, where then they relax and they go and they sit down and start talking. to these other older veterans that have been through it and developing that support system. And so we're going to be working in collaboration. On March 13th, they're having an event, and so I'm trying to alert the other community colleges. But this is a great resource, and what we're finding is, again, because of the stigma, it's very, very difficult to expect a veteran to go, and after you've been told to suck it up and adapt it at all costs, to suddenly, if you're having some issues and you're not sleeping at night, or you keep a gun under your pillow, or all the different things, that maybe that's not the healthiest way, that you don't have to live that way. So we have all these different services that come into our Veterans Resource Center, along with the Soldiers Project that also offers free counseling, and that's the issue about the families. The Soldiers Project here in Sacramento has, I think, 92 therapists that offer free counseling, unlimited, to veterans, family members, parents, spouses, children, at no expense. And so they come up every week, again, because one of the key components is you have to build that trust with the veteran, because of everything that they've had to overcome. They need to feel safe before they're going to allow themselves to be vulnerable, and so that's something that we're doing. So I would love for anyone to come and visit the Vets Resource Center. And one thing that's very difficult, actually, as I say this, I also kind of received an email from my dean that that she has a concern that maybe we need to see about if it's a need. And so, even though I had like 50 veterans that came to our Veterans Resource Center last week, and so I think what we need is, as for the group, as we're trying to create these support systems, that we do get the support from the chancellor's office and from CDVA to show that there really is this need, and that by veterans helping veterans, it could be, make a life difference for these vets. So I just want to say thank you very much, Bobby, and that the judge's office and CDVA is doing. I appreciate it.
I think she answered the question probably better than I did about what resources you need. You just need a facility there and a lot of time together, because there's all these groups out there that want to support it and do it. I will mention this, is that I noticed that the Cal State system put out from their leadership group, the president put out a memo to all the other California State universities to have a veteran service organization on campus. I understand the UCs have not done it, and I was told, and I may be wrong, but I was told that the community colleges have not done that. And I think that's the sort of support that the state colleges are doing, and they're actually, so every state college is supposed to have one of these there. When I was talking to Bucky Peterson today, he said, and the real beauty of it is when you get a community college to have the Vet Resource Center, then the state college has the Vet Resource Center, or the UC. There's a continuum of support structure for the veteran to achieve the American dream. The other thing that the state college, when I was talking to President Whitaker, told me at San Diego, was that the veterans are good students. They're older. They're there for a reason. They know what they're doing. A lot of times they're married, and they're going to do well in school and move it on up. If you I used to run a school for about 7 years, so I know what that means about having good students on the campus. Does quite a bit for the academic environment, which we want to have quality academic experiences at the community college. So.
Well, thank you very much for coming. Absolutely, thank you. And thank you, Bobby McDonald, for arranging that. I would like to mention two things. You've been handed a revision of that LA Times letter to the editor with all the pages included and our response. And we're back. Marlene Garcia, is she in the room?
Yes.
Yes. She's going to continue. She's going to give Valerie's report, because I think Valerie is busy with something else. And were you going to start with the Legislator of the Year discussion?
I was going to wait on that.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Actually, what I would like to start with is an update on our federal relations activities, and it follows perfectly from the words of the new Undersecretary. which we look forward to working with him. He's exactly the kind of advocate we need to talk about the experience of our veteran students. So, just briefly, as you know, we're going to be going to Washington, D.C. next week and participating in the Association of Community College Trustees Congressional Summit. So they have their series of conference sessions, as well as building in time for us to meet with members of Congress. And in our case, we're going to be spending a lot of time also meeting with members of the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Labor, two key agencies that are critical for us in terms of forming the relationships that we need to potentially secure new federal funding for our key priorities. The priority for us will be jobs, veterans, and college completion when we go to D.C. As far as, let's start with the veterans. Of course, we have the federal earmark that we've submitted. Valerie Purnell and her staff have done a terrific job of developing an earmark proposal that was submitted to Senator Feinstein, as well as Congressman Bob Filner. The proposal is exactly what the Undersecretary talked about, establishing a pilot program that would be funded at $2.9 million, and it would be focusing on creating a place for veterans and a full-service place where they can go to seek their student services, to get information on financial aid, particularly the greatly enhanced GI benefits that have recently been approved, as well as coordinating with other regional veterans organizations in the county. So this is a critical proposal for us, and one that we're hoping to do a full court press on to demonstrate just how critical this is for California. And we're looking forward to partnering with Mr. Chavez in trying to get the support we need. Congressman Filner, one of the individuals that the earmark was submitted to, the earmark request, is chairman of the Veterans Committee in the House. So we think that obviously will be a key person for us. And Chancellor Constance Carroll, who knows Congressman Filner well, has gone to bat for this appropriations request and has already talked to him personally about seeking his support and hoping and asking him to carry our earmark request. So when we go to D.C., we certainly will talk to as many members as we can about the importance of this earmark for California. The second issue,
Vice Chancellor, are we going to meet with someone from the Veterans Department also? I'm trying to remember the schedule.
yes, we are. As a matter of fact, from the Department of Labor, there's the Undersecretary Ray Jefferson, who runs veterans programs out of the Department of Labor. We're going to be meeting with him and Jane Oates in that department, who also is working on a lot of the American Graduation Initiatives proposals that are out there. So, and I should take this moment to also thank Board Member Baca, who's been instrumental in helping us facilitate those meetings, both back in February and again for next week. So those will be key meetings when we go to the Department of Labor. And we're also hoping to be able to meet briefly with Secretary Hilda Solis. And
Thank you.
so just quickly,
Oh, sorry, Member Lockyer.
I would highly recommend that whoever that is designing the model, the center model, that they look at a successful and federally funded model of a center where there's comprehensive services, which is the Alameda County Family Justice Center that I head up is actually one of 15 that were originally funded through the Office of Violence Against Women, and we have been identified by the feds as a best practice in the comprehensive service delivery. So if you were to be in your advocacy or design, be referring to a federally recognized best practice. And there's a National Family Justice Center Alliance website that would have all that for you.
okay. We'll certainly look into that. Maybe you can give us some contact information. So the two major pieces of legislation that are pending in Congress that we're going to be weighing in heavily are, of course, the American Graduation Initiative, which is embedded in H.R. 3221. We talked about that in January. This is the Student Aid and Fiscal Responsibility Act. And this bill has been stalled for some time now. The House took action last September to approve the bill, which is very significant for us in the community colleges. It increases Pell Grants, if you recall, by about $40 billion over the course of 10 years. It also, under the rubric of the American Graduation Initiative, it would provide an additional $150 million just for community colleges in California for innovative projects as well as proven projects. And it also would provide $625 million for community college capital facilities in California. So it's obviously something that's very important to us. But it did get tangled in the healthcare reform issue. And at this point, the latest we're hearing is that there may be some movement on healthcare reform. What ultimate form it takes, we're not sure, but they're looking at the reconciliation bill, and that would be the vehicle that this bill would move in. So we're paying very close attention to it again. We're hoping that the timing of our visit will be such that it will be timely for us to weigh in on how important this is for California and for community colleges across the country. So there could be some movement on that, and we'll keep you posted on email updates as we learn more about that. The second big bill is, of course, connected to jobs. And the House voted for the Main Street, our Jobs for Main Street back in December, H.R. 2847. And as you probably read this past week, or past 2 weeks, the Senate just voted for that jobs bill. Greatly reduced. The House version funded the bill at about $75 billion, with $23 billion of that funding earmarked for creation of new education jobs. So it's something that's also very significant to us. The Senate version of the bill is greatly reduced. It's a $15 billion package, and some portion of that would be reserved for education jobs as well. Now that will go to conference committee where the Senate and the House will be hashing that out, and hopefully we'll be able to advocate on that bill as well. So there are some significant measures moving through Congress that directly can benefit California. I think that some of the overarching themes that we're going to want to pay attention to, if in fact the American Graduation Initiative is funded through the legislation, the feds are looking to use this funding to push certain reforms, and they'd like to see states starting to gear up for establishing statewide frameworks to utilize this new funding, as opposed to funding individual, innovative programs. They'd like to see these programs hang together in a coherent fashion. So there'll be a lot of talk about that if, in fact, these measures go through. One last point about the president's budget is it did contain funding for the American Graduation Initiative. So not sure what's going to happen with that if the bill does not go through, because nothing is guaranteed. But clearly, the president wants to push for that kind of funding, and he does have an appropriation in the budget specifically for American Graduation Initiative. So with that, I'm happy to answer some questions, and Valerie will be communicating with you regularly and providing information on these issues.
Thank you, Member Lockyer.
When you meet with Hilda Solis, you can mention to her that Nadia says hello. She's actually my son's godmother.
Oh, okay, good. Is that written down on your list? Oh, great. Good.
And yesterday you had said that you wanted to know if any of the key contacts were incorrect, so you know my congressperson's different.
Fix that.
Okay. Anybody else have any corrections for their key contact list?
I'll get that to you later.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Did I forget that? Just want to make sure, Member Baca, want to specifically thank you for all your help in planning the meetings for Washington, D.C. You stepped out when we were talking about the meetings in the Department of Labor, and he's put a lot of work helping to get these meetings scheduled in both February and March, so thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We are on to the budget update. Vice Chancellor Skinner, a member.
As that's happening, I wonder if Vice Chancellor Michalowski could tell us the other coordinators that were here. We had about 6 or 8
Yes,
coordinators, and I
yes.
just wanted to
Oh,
know
many.
what other colleges were represented with the veterans group. Thank you.
I'm pleased to do that. The group is basically one representative from each region of the state, and 2 regions were missing. But the person who spoke was Catherine Morris, who's a faculty member at Sierra College. We also had Amy Utt, who is at Solano College. Tom Morehouse from Shasta College. Mario Mihaly from College of San Mateo. Todd Steffen from Las Positas College, Susie Briones from West Hills College, Lemoore, Renard Thomas from College of the Canyons, Frank Menjevac from Long Beach City College, and Belinda Harris from San Diego City College.
Thank you so much.
And on a slightly different note, I guess we did get handed out a response from Patrick Perry about vocational course completion rates, explanations of decline. He's not here for our meeting, so I guess he wanted to send us that information. Vice Chancellor Skinner.
Good afternoon. President Malumed, members of the Board of Governors, Chancellor Scott. The issue that is before you is an update on the state budget. And I have 3 particular items I'd like to bring to your attention. Those are, there's a bill that was recently passed out of the legislature to enact a new funding deferral for the California community colleges. I'll give you a brief update on that. You should have received some email updates ahead of time on that. The second point is the Legislative Analyst's Office report that was issued last week, making their recommendations to the legislature regarding the community college budget and really the education budget as a whole. And then the third item is the issue of some surveys that have been conducted to assess impacts on of the budget cuts on our districts. And that's an item that you've asked for in the past, and so we've managed to compile those, and we have those before you. So I'll, if I could, I'll start with the funding deferral bill. This bill, Assembly Bill 5 from the 8th Extraordinary Session, was one of these special session bills that Marlene was talking about before. It was introduced on Monday, or at least new language was inserted into it that sprung on us the prospect of an additional deferral. Actually, the bill contains deferrals for K-12, UC, CSU, local governments, and the community colleges. And there are 2 components to that bill that affect the colleges. And the first is a new deferral. This was actually the most concerning feature of the bill. A new deferral that would push this upcoming March payment that colleges are expecting, would push that out as long as a month. Now, the purpose behind the bill is to improve the state's cash flow picture so that they're better positioned to sell some state bonds. State bonds that support capital outlay projects, including capital outlay projects at the community colleges. So, there's a reason behind this. It wasn't just to inflict some, additional hassle on the colleges. There was a policy motive behind it. But that March deferral presented some real threats to our colleges, and we raised those concerns with the agencies involved in crafting the bill. But in a nutshell, it's when you disrupt the cash flow to the districts that significantly with that little notice, you really run the risk of leaving them in the lurch, not being able to make payroll, not being able to fulfill their obligations, including repayment of debt, like the tax revenue anticipation notes that many colleges have. And so we raise those concerns, and along with the concern that the community colleges are already juggling roughly $1 billion worth of deferrals, a little over $1 billion worth of deferrals that have been introduced over the last few years as some of these kind of smoke and mirrors approaches to trying to solve the state budget problem. And so, our argument was this was a straw that was going to break the camel's back, at least with the March deferral, and we were able to negotiate some mitigation on that hopefully will keep our colleges out of trouble a month from now. But it is a matter of concern. It took a lot of effort on the part of many people in order to try to get those mitigations in place. The most significant of which is an assurance that the colleges would be repaid on April 6th, as opposed to, as the bill would have allowed the repayment to occur as late as May 1st. And so what we're hearing from colleges is with that shortening of the deferral period, that will significantly reduce the burden. And then we also will have some limited ability to provide relief to a few districts if they are in particular distress. So, it was a bit of a more, a fairly technical bill, but I think with some pretty high stakes concerns, and we were successful at getting it mitigated. So that's the current status. It's going to the governor. The bill's passed through the legislature, and most likely, we're anticipating the governor will sign that bill, since his Department of Finance was involved in negotiating it. And again, just a further reflection of the state's fiscal distress and its problems meeting its own cash flow obligations. The second point is on the Legislative Analyst's Office report that came out last week. And on this item, you have a handout. It's the green one-page sheet. It has a front and a back. And I'll just quickly step through it. I think most of you are aware of the role of the Legislative Analyst's Office as a nonpartisan advisor to the legislature. And every year, the Legislative Analyst's Office reviews the governor's budget proposal for the upcoming year and provides recommendations to the legislature on how to act. And so the document is important in that it frames the budget and policy debates that are going to be heard in the legislature during this coming spring, in the weeks and months to come. Oftentimes, it really kicks off a kind of a more substantive conversation of the budget options for the coming year. And so, quickly I'll review what LAO recommended. I'll start with their Proposition 98 overview. And this is a very technical subject. I won't go into all the details, but essentially, Proposition 98 is the minimum funding guarantee that exists in the California Constitution. It was put there by the voters in 1988. And it controls a minimum level of spending for K-12 schools and community colleges. Well, because of it is really a fundamental driver of the budgets for the colleges and K-12 schools, and shapes the landscape around the whole budget conversation. So it's an issue that we watch with great attention, and it is a primary determinant of how things are going to end up for the colleges. So essentially, LAO identifies a number of very technical factors that are at play this year in the Prop 98 calculations that could lead to a wide variety of funding outcomes or calculations of the minimum guarantee. And the range here that I've identified is the LAO indicates that based on these scenarios that the Proposition 98 minimum guarantee could be as high or even higher than $5.4 billion above the level that the governor's already proposed. And that would place a considerable additional burden on the state if they attempt to fund that. Obviously, if it were to be funded, it would mean that many of our fiscal worries would be over, in the sense that there would be resources available to backfill a lot of the cuts that we've taken. But I think the reality in this budget context is the state likely is not going to have the resources available to fund those higher levels. And so, this will be an issue that we watch as the budget process plays out. LAO indicates a couple different ways the state could try to fund this, which one would be to cut other programs more significantly so there are resources left to fund the colleges and the K-12 schools at a higher level. They could raise taxes in order to fund the higher level, but that's a situation where the state ends up chasing its tail, because as they generate more tax revenues, it makes the Proposition 98 guarantee go up higher. Right. And so because of that, the state would have to raise roughly $6 billion in tax revenues, provide all those monies to the colleges and K-12 schools. And again, politically doesn't seem very feasible in this environment. So I think what LAO is actually going to push for is for suspension of Proposition 98, which will allow the legislature and the governor to set the funding level for K-12 schools and colleges at whatever level they want. So I think that this analysis, when it came out, I'm sure is causing many of the folks in the legislature and in the administration to sweat a little bit, trying to figure out how they're going to deal with this cost pressure. Specifically for the colleges, this is pretty straightforward. They don't, there are a number of policy proposals that the LAO recommends for the colleges, but in a lot of ways it's not a very complicated story to tell. The LAO recommends raising fees for community college students to $40 per credit unit. That's a 53% increase, over a 53% increase from current levels, the $26 per credit unit. That would generate $150 million. And then LAO recommends that the legislature use those resources to buy some things in the community college budget. Those, most notably, that's buying 2.2% enrollment growth. That's the same amount the governor is proposing buying. It costs $126 million. But they recommend doing that with this fee revenue rather than doing it out of the state general fund as the governor would do. The second feature, the second aspect that they would use these funds for would be to reject the governor's proposal to provide a negative cost of living adjustment to the community colleges. That negative COLA was 0.38%, equals $23 million. So they'd use some of this money to reverse that. And so essentially they want to raise some money by increasing student fees, and then use those dollars to buy some things in the community college budget without creating additional state costs. So those are the big points. The LAO recommends rejecting the governor's proposal to cut EOPS and part-time faculty compensation. They recommend rejecting the governor's proposal to augment Career Tech, SB 70 Career Tech, by $20 million. And then the last theme I'll touch on is the LAO recommends providing additional flexibility to our community colleges to help them navigate the difficult budget situation that they're in right now. And some of those features will be quite controversial within the system here, but they include suspension of the full-time faculty obligation, suspension of the 50% law, or possibly a modification of the 50% law. They would like to suspend some existing limitations on the ability of community college districts to contract out for non-instructional activities. And then lastly, the LAO would recommend adding additional programs into that categorical flexibility item that was established for the first time this year. So those are the outlines of the LAO proposal, and it might be a good place to stop and see if there's some questions. Yeah.
Thank you. But you did not mention rejecting $20 million augmentation to SB 70 CTE, and instead suggests the legislature provide $48 million in support.
That's right. So the proposal here is the governor had proposed $68 million for SB 70 Career Tech. And so LAO would knock that down to $48 million.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Are there any questions from the board? Member Thomas and Member Larwood.
Vice Chancellor Skinner, I apologize if you've addressed this and it kind of went over my head, so I'll ask. In this budget year, in the 9-10 year, is there a sense at this point what the level of budget shortfall might be? I know districts are anticipating and projecting some shortfall of the money that they think they're going to get. Do you have a sense of what that might be?
So you're talking in the 2009-10 year, yes. The year we're in now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's starting to firm up a little more. I'll tell you the main features, obviously the ways that we could have a whole-blown in our current year budget. The way that the districts could face an additional liability this year would be, one, if there were mid-year cuts from the state. So far, that doesn't appear to be coming. That deferral proposal that I talked about earlier is as close as we've seen to that. Mm-hmm. So, absent some significant shift of events, I'm not seeing mid-year cuts. The other way that it occur is if there's a shortfall in property taxes or student fees. Mm-hmm. Now, what we've seen as in our most recent numbers, we've just tabulated the first principal apportionment, the P1, and we're actually seeing that essentially we're on track, that we're not seeing a shortfall emerge there. Property taxes are just a bit high, and student fees are just a bit low, and it cancels out. So that's welcome news that we're not seeing a shortfall emerge at this juncture. The last thing I'd say on that is these numbers on the fees, and particularly on the property taxes, have demonstrated the ability to swing around late in the year. A couple years ago, we had an April surprise in which close to a $90 million shortfall emerged in property taxes. So while the current numbers are looking pretty good, I think given the volatility in the housing market and in public finance in general, I think we need to keep a skeptical eye to those numbers. And so there's still some risk on that front.